Okay, so let's have some questions for Michael. Who wants to start? Okay, I'll start. I got three questions. We'll start with the first one that I wrote down. When you were talking about the Swedish, he was a philosopher?
Human geographer.
Human geographer. He was talking about maybe how far a community can separate and still be a community, and that's dependent partly on its infrastructure. Is that right?
Not really. He talked about something more simple, about the individual and how, what is your capacity to move. For example, let's say you have a scooter, right? And you work in Downshui, right? So you need to spend, let's say, 1 hour driving one way and 1 hour coming back. And this is kind of limit of your capacity, because let's say at 5 o'clock you need to be in Xindian, right? So then it limits you. You cannot go further than Downshui in this amount of time you have. You plan everything, you schedule it, right? Because you need to kind of have in mind that you need to be back on time to the, let's say, home, and then go to Xindian. He was talking about this kind of things.
I thought you mentioned community, but I guess what you were talking about is community as a whole, and he was focusing on the individual. Not when you said community, I was thinking like you could say us as a community. How far can we be apart from each other to still be connected with each other is dependent on infrastructure. No,
not really. Talking about community, he would maybe say something like that your individual capacities to go somewhere are like this, and you are like that, and mine are like this, and then we could kind of summarize it and make a graphical representation of it, right? And that's it. So he was very concerned with individual, because mostly geographers before him, they were seeing things as a kind of in terms of communities and whole groups of people. And he was the first one, and he's got a lot of awards for one paper actually, that where he constructed this kind of graphical representation for individual movement.
Okay. Questions? Jim?
I guess I have one. I think it's a pretty important topic, especially today. Like there was an article in the BBC the other day saying that nowadays there are more professionals living and working abroad than ever before, and it's increasing. It's just with globalization, more and more opportunities are opening up. But this link between wisdom and travel has been around at least since Greek times, and like Heraclitus, he remarked, we never step into the same river twice, and all is change and all is becoming. But I guess my question for you would be, based on what you've been reading, to what extent does it become, what should people keep in mind that are doing that to keep it healthy? Because as far as I can tell, it seems like, as human beings, we desire transcendence, but we can also go in the other direction where it becomes and it doesn't seem like there's much in between. You're either going to transcend as you're mobile, or you're going to slip further and further into alienation. And there's not really much in between. You're going to do one or the other, as far as I've been able to tell myself from being a person who's done this. But it's have you anything from your reading that they suggest to keep in mind?
Let me relate to the first part you said about the intellectual or wisdom and travel, right? First, just one remark. This is very crucial. It's called a brain drain. That is, for example, you have a PhD programs, right? That the foreigners are coming to complete, and most of them they stay in the foreign country, right? So let's say some countries are losing those people who could finish a PhD in their home country. And another thing is that traveling academics, right? They are nomads, really. They are nomads, but they are living in some sort of bubble. And you're talking about alienation, right? Or transgression. And from my perspective, it seems that more often it ends up as alienation than transgression. Because of course, probably the easiest way, let's say you decide, I want to transgress, I want to transform, become somebody else, right? Kind of test my boundaries. The easiest way to do it is like to not eat for 4 days, or to go somewhere, right? That you will go to another place, it will influence you and it will change you. This is kind of very romantic view on travel. But as you're saying, that mostly it end up with alienation, because everyone is in motion. That is, people barely meet each other, right? And there's only this the technological base that we can use to kind of keep in touch. But this is a different way of communicating, and it changes the human relations. So I would say that this is a big phenomenon now, and is basically, it's very addictive actually. But some people, when they start being mobile or hypermobile, they cannot stop. It becomes. But you see, now I'm applying some sort of moral judgment to it, which is kind of. I'm trying to see it as a pathology, which is. I try to kind of undermine this way of seeing a movement, of being mobile, right? It's a very sedentary way of thinking, very fixed way of thinking. So this is very complex phenomenon. This is, yes, it's alienating, but from the other hand, I don't know if this is that easy to judge it. You see, because we go back to the grounds of being fixed, of staying in one place and talking about people who travel, right? And try to see this as a blessing, right? As an advantage, or as a pathology, social pathology that they cannot find their place in the structure. They don't fit anymore, misfits, right? So I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, I was just wondering if there's anything that, from what based on your reading, that they advise that to keep in mind, or they're just dealing with the topic in kind of a broader sense.
Mostly, those mobile people, they live in some sort of channels. What they see are airports, terminals, and taxis, and let's say lecture rooms, right, at the universities, or laboratories, where they perform their tasks, and then they go back home. So this is it's kind of new space created, which called hyperspace, right? It looks everywhere the same. The airport looks everywhere the same, right? Basically, when you don't know on where you're at, you cannot say this is Frankfurt or Chicago, right? This is the airport. This is the terminal. It works in the same fashion. So, and interestingly, airport is designed in this way. This kind of space, is hyperspace, is designed this way. It kind of makes you that you don't want to really interact with anybody, right? You do your stuff. You pick up your boarding card, and then you wait, calmly for your plane, or you make shopping at the store. But you don't really, right? You don't communicate with people around you. I mean, it happens sometimes, right? You start a conversation with somebody. But this is basically, airport discourages this kind of activity by design. So it's also about alienation.
Sonia?
Okay. I'm not perfectly sure, and I understand the concept, because you were talking about having this rigid strategy of movement on one hand, and on the other hand, making use of the space for your own movement. So, for example, let's say you have these business corporate people who move around the world for various reasons, but mostly for pursuing their career or making more money or whatever, which is very based on very clear and determined strategy. It eventually, I believe that it ends up in alienation as well, sometimes within the family, but yeah, it's kind of lonely life anyway. But on the other hand, and this is very, well, based on what you said, I don't really see anything nomadic in this way of lifestyle, because sometimes those people don't really choose to do that, but kind of, well, if, I'm driven by the motive of making more money and this is the price I need to pay, I will pay for it. And you know, on the other hand, let's say you have backpackers, which kind of, you know, without even having clear plan where to go, right? Maybe you start at certain country and then you move on, and even though it might lead to very active social interaction, right? Meeting loads of people, but still might be again a symptom of alienation as well, right?
Often is.
Yes. So I mean, I know this could be just kind of like a matter of definition, but does this all kind of belong to the nomadic culture, or?
Okay. Maybe that would be a bit more clear if I speak faster and get to the fourth part, which was basically about the business people.
Okay, here is a chance.
That is, their nomadism is not so much about being able to move. It's more about, let's say, the issues like citizenship, legal issues. It's their approach to their own belongingness. For example, in Hong Kong, 10% of affluent population have a foreign passport. And why they have it? Not to travel abroad, but to have this motility, to have this, you know, capacity that if there's something goes wrong with China, they can go to California and have a nice life. So this is nomadic way of thinking. Not only about this that they can move somewhere, which is simply like nomadic, but the nomadism is somewhere else. It's their approach to, let's say, their legal belongingness, having passport. They can give it up and have another passport. They have this kind of mode that they do things which are profitable without any grudge, you know?
But that's very pragmatic.
Pragmatic,
yeah.
yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's not purely about having kind of free mind to, you know.
Not really. It's very opportunistic, in some sense. Mm-hmm.
Jim?
I was just going to ask you if you did, while you're doing your research there, if you were doing anything on reverse culture shock, like the idea of when you actually go home and then you know, you're kind of back in the bubble all of a sudden, and you know, just in terms of dealing with that, because all of a sudden again you're in a different relationship to your surroundings permanently.
Exactly what I mean. If you choose this lifestyle, or well, the ways are, I would say that this is always a choice, you know, to some extent. Sonia was talking about the businessman, that you take it as a package, right? This is your job and you want to travel a lot, and this is kind of the price you pay. But if you don't really like it, and I guess there are some people who don't like it, and they just become somebody else, not a businessman, right? So, but what you're saying about the reverse culture shock, there's a point, right, that when you cross this point, there's no return, right? This is sort of with like a heroin, you know. When you go you go with it, you know, to live in some place for some time, then you will be sort of marked, or you will have this in you, this kind of tension that you're gonna deal sooner or later, right? That you will go to the other place, you go home, and you will feel simply unhappy. This is kind of sentence. I mean, I'm very pessimistic thinking about this, but mostly we don't really, we are not aware of it, right? While doing this, that this is obvious that you go to foreign country, and then you will have to deal with the language issue and the culture and, you know, weather and all these things, right? This is kind of predictable, but this, that you will go back to your own country, right? And you won't be the same person, right? And the country won't be the same, right? Because everything is changing. So, because this is the problem about nostalgia, that you have nostalgia is a kind of sentiment for the present, right? That you have a sentiment for something that it exists, but it's not in the form that you wish it to exist. And I think that this culture shock, the reverse culture shock, sorry, culture shock is about nostalgia. For something that exists only in your head, in your memories, but it doesn't exist anymore.
You have other questions? I'd like to ask another question on the topic of culture. I thought it was interesting what you said. You said there was a woman that was studying refugees, and she mentioned that refugees are naked because they've lost their culture in a way. Can you compare a little bit between, I think what you were just talking about is culture changing in an individual. Can you compare that to culture changing in a larger group of people, and what are the terms for change in culture? Mm-hmm. in both the individual and the larger group of people?
You mean compare being naked, like deprived from culture, and having many cultures, or having culture which is changing within you?
Yeah, I guess all three of them. I guess, what does it mean to be naked of culture? To have no culture. Mm-hmm. What does it mean for culture to change in an individual? Mm-hmm. And what are the terms of change for culture as a whole, or can culture as a whole change, or a specific culture?
Okay, the first one is the point was that the culture is associated with belonging to the state, any state, but the state, recognizable, right? So if you don't have state, you don't have culture. I mean, this is you do have a culture, but you are perceived as a person who is naked, and that's what she meant. There are a lot of people who they don't fit anywhere. Yeah, there was this movie Terminal, right? And I don't know if you've seen this movie. It's about the guy who came to the States, played by Tom Hanks, and while he was traveling, his country disappeared because of the civil war or something. And then, so, he was having a passport which didn't represent any country, and they didn't want to let him into the States because that would be a case, and the other people would follow. So he's been living in the terminal for, I don't know, a year or 9 months or something like that. And this is something, you see, I mean, you don't fit to the structure, and then nobody knows what to do with you. And this is the case of refugees. And yeah, the second, you said about the changing of the culture in the individual. Let me think, changing the culture.
I mean, just like, I think that's what you were kind of talking about. You go from your home country to another country, and you said that person is kind of marked at that point to their culture is, if they spend any length of time, their culture is changing inside of themselves. They may no longer fully associate with their home culture themselves, yes. Yeah. Or they might feel like they have a mix of cultures.
Exactly. There's this kind of, you dealing with some kind of hybrid, right? Hybrid culture. Some elements mixed up with each other. And actually it's hard to define what it is in every individual case. There's a term called culture intelligence, right? This is kind of your abilities to deal with some tensions caused by foreign culture, like your language abilities, your stress level, all these things. So everyone has a different kind of level of cultural intelligence and differently deals with the problems. So as a result, has a sort of, if we can really, I mean, it's hard to talk about culture as something that you possess, This is, I would see it rather as a process, as a flow, which is it never stops, right? You are never the same person. So, what I could say on this is that traveling speed up this process of fluctuation, right? Because you have more essence coming to you. But it happens if you live in your little village somewhere, right? You are changing all the time because you experience different things every day. So, and the third was about the
third part. I just have this idea that generally we think that, like, let's take the United States for example. If we can say that the United States has a culture, it seems like people would say that the United States has kind of always had this culture, or maybe it's changed over the last 250 years, but for the last 50 years it's had this set culture, and then that's the American culture. How do, or Chinese culture for thousands of years, how do these major group cultures change, or can they, or what are the terms that will make them change?
Okay, I would say that the same as in case of individual, it always changes, right? But here, this is really topic for another meeting. It's a very huge topic, but basically what it means, American or Chinese culture, right? It has a lot to do with the state and kind of state procedures or state production of the culture. That this basically state and institutions in many cases decide what is recognized as a national culture, what kind of elements are incorporated into this kind of body of a national culture, which are excluded, right? And it changes over time because the decisions are different. And this is kind of hard to distinguish this very, very core of because then we go into discussion about values, right, and about all this sort of things, which is kind of complicated. But I would like to point out that it's very crucial to keep in mind that there are semi-conscious decisions and the management of what is the nation culture and what is not.
Thanks. I think we have time for one more quick question if anyone would like to ask a question. I have one more then. And Alex mentioned something right before the speech started about, are you going to be talking about how people once moved from desert to desert and now maybe people move from city to city. So my question is, traditionally, did people spend much of their life moving around inside of a city? Do you know? Or was it more from city to city, or from the country to the city, or from country to country, or maybe, as you mentioned, from talking about the pilgrim from a country, a state to a frontier, if that frontier even existed? I mean, in your studies, did you?
Okay.
What was most of nomadicism in the past? Was it?
Okay, traditionally, you have three kinds of nomadism, right? You have the hunter-gatherers, following herds, right? And then you have pastoral nomadism, right? Taking care of sheep, for instance. And the third one is peripatetic nomadism, which means that there's a craftsman who has some skills and he travels from place to place and kind of exercise his knowledge and his abilities, right? And this is the third kind of nomadism. It's a very into context of postmodern condition. English teachers in Asia, right? Not looking far away. So, but you're talking what kind of mobility happened? Let's say, basically the world used to be very fixed, and people had places, and they were born and they died, and that was it. But the first, except crusades and all this kind of big and spectacular events, people were living their lives in the fixed places, and just the development of capitalism and industry made the movement from the countryside to the cities visible and massive, right? And nowadays, this is, to some extent, you might have a opposite tendency, right? Tendency that you go back to countryside because people are just tired with living in a large megalopolis. They need to drive car for 2 hours to get to work. So this is kind of opposite tendency, or they move between the cities. There is one guy called Appadurai, and he created the theory of scapes, and he distinguished 5 scapes: ethnoscapes, simply people, right, and technoscapes, infrastructure, technology, and all infrastructure which is necessary to move. And what else was there? Ideascapes and the mediascapes, which is about the informations and the images and the kind of flowing of messages globally, and distinguishing ideascapes as a more political. For example, here's interesting analysis on how the terms like freedom or democracy are used in different contexts in a different part of the globe. And another one was finance-scape, about money flowing, capital flow, kind of simple thing. And he tried to, and he kind of analyzed it, that those scapes do not go together sometimes, you know. It's a one big mass movement of things, of ideas, of images, of sort of imagination, because movement is not only about moving, but it's also about dreaming about moving, right? This is the very common, like we discussed about transgression, it's a very common feature in our thinking. That is, let's say, you wait for, you work hard just to be able to go somewhere, or like promising yourself every morning that I'm gonna quit this and I'm gonna move out to another country or another city, right? You might not never do it, but this is something. This is a movement which is in your imagination, and all of those sort of movements are very mixed with each other. So basically, what Appadurai is saying about this, that is that the analysis of migration says that migration is more and more chaotic, but actually Appadurai says it looks like this, but actually it's run by some sort of channels. The states try to grasp these scapes and channel it in some desired fashion. That's what he's saying, and that's what is maybe related to your question, that even this movement which appears to be so random, right, and Brownian, it's actually underneath, it's kind of controlled, or at least deals with some sort of attempts to be controlled, right? And again, we go back to this tension between the structure and trying to grasp this movement, those people who wants to go here or there, and then you have all those little tactics that the people apply to be able to move where they want. So it's again tension between two kind of powers. And I don't know if I answered. Okay.
Okay, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.